It's Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, local experts on the number one daily sports podcast network. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get them. You know the drill by now. And you can also follow us on YouTube. So check us out on video at YouTube, and you can just check us out at Locked On Hornets there as well. Follow me on Twitter at Walker Mail, and follow Julian Council straight up at Julian Council. Just boring handles, just our names. That's the only thing it's out there for both of us. Appreciate Julian hopping on with us once again. Did you miss us? Did you miss talking Hornets and firing off some takes with us?
A little bit. I hope you guys enjoyed your Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah.
And then I guess last week, I don't know what I had going on. But yeah, I'm glad to be back to talk about some little Bugs news. It's a nice change of pace after spending so much time talking about the constant drama that's going on with the Carolina Panthers and also just like the negativity that is surrounding the fan base. And I'm guilty of it too, because I'm just kind of sick of it because I can't ever get away from it. But the Hornets are positive. They're fun.
Yeah.
Despite what's happened the last couple of days with the losses and the COVID issues, but still there is actually excitement and hope surrounding a franchise in town, which is typically not this franchise. So I'm happy at least to be able to get away from that arena and enter this one.
Roles are a little reversed. You're right about the drama surrounding the Panthers. It's nuts, man. I mean, the Panthers are such a dramatic franchise at this moment. Bringing in Cam Newton to only enhance it. He's awful against the Dolphins, but there are obviously outside influences. Joe Brady's gone because that's going to be the answer for their offense going forward. We're just going to run the football a million times, according to Matt Rule, and we'll see if they get the win against Atlanta. But I'm sure you've talked enough about Carolina. Hell, I have too on 7:30 game. So let's talk Hornets, because you're right, Julian. Like, the Hornets, they are fun. They're really close to winning these games against Philadelphia, but just like they do every single time against the 76ers, they lose in excruciating fashion. It happened again. At least this one didn't go into overtime, but Joel Embiid just punked him at the end of this game, just like he always does. If you hold him to 25-10, then you have a shot to win. But he goes for 40. He goes for 30. That's enough to get the dub for Philadelphia. We'll get to the officiating. We'll get to some of that in the next segment. I do want to go over that game. I do want to kind of go over big picture, whether the Hornets can survive this little stretch they're going to have without LaMelo, without Terry, without some of these key pieces, 3 starters, and rotation guys. I want to get to that later on in the show. But the more pressing topic, I think, around the Charlotte Hornets right now, even with some other significant news, it's the fact that Myles Turner is out there to be had. And you speak about drama, you've got some going on with the Indiana Pacers where they're contemplating a fire sale. Don't know if it's going to be Sabonis and or Turner or Karis LeVert and him. And there's so many different combinations that the Pacers could decide to deal all of these key pieces out. But we've known for a while, Myles Turner has been the guy that Charlotte has wanted. There have been reports about them inquiring. Saw a couple of tweets that Charlotte is the number one team again to look for in this Myles Turner sweepstakes. I think it's time, Julian. I think now is the time to go after a guy like Myles Turner. We haven't seen Mitch Kupchak pull the trigger on any in-season trade yet, and I've been cool with that. I like the way that he thinks, not wanting to get rid of assets, not wanting to get rid of young talent. It wasn't time then. They were in rebuild. They were post-Kemba. You didn't want to get rid of those sorts of things because as a small market team, that is the thing that holds the most value to you. Now you have LaMelo. Miles Bridges is playing like a borderline all-star. You have a decent core. If you bring in a centerpiece, quite literally a centerpiece like Myles Turner, league leader in block shots, can shoot from the outside. I don't want to give up the farm in order to get Myles Turner, but that's certainly not only worth exploring, but Julian, I'm to the point now where I'm willing to have to sacrifice something decent in order to get a Myles on this squad. What say you about the rumors surrounding Myles Turner and whether Charlotte should be seriously interested?
Well, don't get too greedy. We already have 1 Myles. Do we need 2 Myles?
Yes. The answer is yes. I'm greedy as hell.
So I'm kind of surprised that Indiana is in this situation. Like, no, I do not watch the Pacers play unless they play the Hornets. But when I look at that roster and see that they have known Hornets killer TJ Warren, also Myles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, who's been an all-star before, Karis LeVert, who I really
also
like.
Hornets killer Sabonis, also.
Yeah, also a Hornets killer. Saw opening night. Like in opening night, you go back, they were up by 24 points before they blew that lead and Charlotte came back and won that game. And then since then, it's been all downhill. They hired Rick Carlisle in the offseason after a 1 year with the other dude who I don't even know who he was and where he came from after they got rid of Nate McMillan. That's how relevant that coach was even last season. But you bring in Rick Carlisle, who's a very good coach in the NBA, and from Dallas after he spent his time there for over a decade with Mark Cuban. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is going to be one of those teams that contends for a top 6 spot in the East. Instead, they're talking about just tearing it down and getting rid of their players. That's a wild thing that's happened here in the first half of the season. I mean, really, first quarter of the season in the NBA. As far as Myles Turner, when you look at the Hornets, and you're right, Mitch Kupchak has yet to go out there and make an in-season trade. They haven't really been in a position to need to. This team came out there media day before the season started and talked about what they wanted to do was be a playoff team this year. It was playoffs or bust. That was the edict. I know your former co-host and our friend Nada
Hated
was
it.
not
Couldn't
hated
stand
it,
it.
was not on board. But right now, I wonder how he feels about that. Even after the losses and the COVID stuff, they've still gone out there and played really well. In some glowing words about James Borrego and his team last night from Doc Rivers, the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. But now they are in position with Terry Rozier whenever he comes back, with LaMelo Ball, which thank God with the ping pong balls finally helped us out there with him. Miles Bridges looking like the most improved player in the NBA this season. What Kelly Oubre has done, you really feel good. Gordon Hayward as well, who's finally aggressive last night. You feel good about the core that you have here. The only thing for me is I don't want to give up any of the players that I just mentioned there. If they want to get, if Indiana really wants to be a team that's going to be rebuilding and they want some young assets and just maybe some draft picks, I'm cool parting ways with Kai Jones or JT
Hmm.
Thor, who's gotten some run, or even hell, Book Knight. He can go. He can give them another first round pick if that's what they want to do. Because if
Hmm.
I'm Indiana, I'm not taking anything really less than that if I'm going to give up a proven player in the NBA, especially from a Charlotte team that desperately needs some center help. Because you get him in here, you still got Richard, you still got Carey behind him, but you have a proven center, and that's probably the one piece that the Hornets are away from being a surefire top 6 team in the Eastern Conference. So if it's meaning giving rid of Book Knight or one of these other rookies or a first round pick to get Myles Turner in here, I'm down with that. But I'm not really trying to get rid of any of the veterans, even though you look at salary cap wise, you probably need to. I just,
Yeah.
at least for this point in time, don't want to.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You have to match salaries. That's just what it is. And I think the guy, one player you didn't mention was PJ, which salary wise, it's going to be hard. You have to
Oh, yeah,
add some
he
other.
can go.
Yeah,
He can
PJ,
go.
you're done with PJ. That's the one I don't
Yeah.
want to get rid of, Julian. That's the one
Well,
guy. So I
after
think.
his personal decisions, he can go.
Oh no, don't bring up the basketball wise. He's decent. Personal decision wise, it's
Both
tough.
he can go. He can
It's
go.
tough. It's tough to watch. But PJ, to me, that anybody that listens to Locked On Hornets knows I really like PJ. I like what he can do with a small ball lineup. Anytime he's in at the center spot, it's a positive lineup. The Hornets have looked really good when he plays the five. I think that is the maximum player value I'm willing to part with, and I'm exhausting every opportunity elsewhere besides getting rid of PJ. And then if I have to, I think that's the time. Okay, fine. If I absolutely have to, or I'm going to lose Miles, I think PJ is the last guy I'm going to be willing to part with. And this is, of course, not including LaMelo, who's untouchable. Miles Bridges, we're not getting rid of. Terry and Gordon, I just don't think the Hornets would get rid of them. And if the Pacers are trying to rebuild, I don't know if they would want Terry Rozier on that contract. I don't know if they would want Gordon
No.
Hayward on that contract. So when we're talking about guys that the Pacers would want, that Charlotte would or should be willing to part with, I think PJ is the last guy that I would be accepting to deal. And even then, it's pretty hard. To your point, though, Julian, I'm fine with dealing Book Knight. I like Book Knight fine. But Book Knight, Kai Jones, a pick, Kelly Oubre, Kai Jones, and James Booknight. Kelly Oubre, I'm cool with. Now, the thing about Kelly, and I know you mentioned him and a guy that you didn't want to get rid of, but his contract next year is not guaranteed. I think that you could capitalize on his 3-point shot making, which is by far career high right now, and kind of do a sell high thing
Yeah.
on him. And so I think Kelly Oubre would be somebody I'd be willing to part with, even if you are a little bit worried about the wing depth with Gordon Hayward being injury prone. I think Cody Martin has shown you can start to trust him a little bit more. You know my love for Jalen McDaniels. He can come in and not give you that offensive half court production, but if Gordon Hayward goes out, at least you can have some defense and some length out there and some 3-point shooting with McDaniels. Like I think you can get by. What we have not seen is them be able to get by against these taller dudes where big guys are just going to destroy him. That's where Myles Turner can come in, and he also is an offensive liability. Shooting 13 points, scoring 13 points a game has really come on strong this year. Julian, I think it's time, man, and I understand you don't want to get rid of the farm, and there's certainly levels to this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's time to maybe have to sacrifice some young assets in a way that Mitch Kupchak hasn't wanted to in years past.
I'm totally fine with that. Like the core four to me is LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Terry Rozier, and Gordon Hayward. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to lose any four of those guys. I can probably hear some fans right now being like, let's get rid of Gordon Hayward, send him back home to Indiana. But I don't really want to do that. And you're right. Oubre, he's just a role player. It wouldn't be smart based off the contract that you brought up. And I also spend so much time talking NFL, I forget you have to do the salary matches in the NBA.
Yeah, that's right.
Like,
It's different.
why,
Yeah, it's a little
why,
different.
why can't all these leagues have the same trade policies and all
Mhm.
that? But they don't. So yeah, like Mason Plumlee, hey, you can go too. If
No,
you,
absolutely. That's the thing. And Doug and I were talking about that, where he's making $8 million, so you could match it there. That's some really nice salary filler. And then if you attach a Mason to a Kai and a Book Night, I don't want to get rid of PJ and Mason because then you don't have any center depth again. If Myles Turner goes down, little banged up player Miles is, which is a knock against him. But if he goes down, then we're right back in the thick of center rotation problems. Oh, and now we don't have PJ, so then we have to rely on Miles at the center again. And so we'll see what the Charlotte Hornets will do. I do want to talk about that core, though, because I do want to talk about the goals that Mitch Kupchak and this roster have set for themselves and
Mhm.
how Myles Turner helps them reach that. Let's get to that in the next segment. Do want to discuss Shopify real quickly, though. It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your own business. In case you don't know, Shopify is a complete commerce platform that lets you start, grow, and manage a business, and the subscription-based software allows anyone to set up an online store and sell their products, and Shopify store owners can help sell in physical locations using Shopify POS. It's the point of sale app and accompanying hardware. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big business, so upstarts, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA right now. Shopify.com/LockedOnNBA. I also want to discuss Truebill. It's the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. And on average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. It's a scam. You don't want to fall for that anymore. Don't fall for them. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and talk more about a potential Myles Turner trade and that game last night against Philadelphia. Coming up next on Locked On Hornets.
Is Locked On Hornets.
We just flat out eat some noodles on Thanksgiving, and they're really good.
That's a new one. I really haven't heard of
I
people
know.
just doing some straight nudes on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Is there some Italian background in your family? Is that why
No.
nudes show up?
No, I don't think.
Nope, just some straight Anglican nudes.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
So if anybody is wondering why there's not as many graphics in today's show, it's because I am an amateur producer at the whole video thing. I'm a radio guy. Doug is as high-tech as it gets, knows everything about video and audio software. And so I've got Adobe Audition down enough to record and do some of the basics. But with this video stuff, you notice that we did not have an intro because I don't know what to do. I just know to click on the button with the B graphic thing that Doug has brought up for me. And so I just click the button when it's time to go to that. There was also me just kind of leaving Julian Council awkwardly standing there, sitting there while I was doing the reads because I don't know how to make the camera focus just on me. So I apologize for some of the weirdness of the graphics today, but we're just trying to get through this together. This is what we have right now.
It's okay. I decided not to say anything at all. So I just sat there. I was trying to look at my phone, being like,
Yeah, what do you do?
Like, what do I do with my hands?
Oh,
It's like, no, I'm just gonna stand here and just look awkwardly.
I'm looking at some of the graphics that were there yesterday. Doug went with me down a list of some of the things that I could do to help out, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. And they're not there this time. Like, I don't know
He
if
lied
it's just
to you. Even
Doug
set
had
up.
him. I wonder if he had them uploaded and they're just not uploaded here for me. I'm just glad to have the videos uploaded because other than that, I don't know what else to do. So this is just what we're going to have to deal with today, Julian. I don't know if we're going to have any music at the end of this. I'm trying my best. So please just cut me some slack. And Julian, you're just going to have to look awkward a little bit when I do the next read. And I'm sorry about it. Either way,
Nope.
let's talk
No
about the.
problem.
If you can you look awkward? That'd be great. Let's talk about Myles Turner once more. You discussed that core, right? Gordon,
Yeah.
Myles, Terry, LaMelo. Yeah, I think that the Hornets might be willing to part with a Gordon or a Terry with the right kind of deal, but ultimately that's a lot harder. I think Myles and LaMelo used to be the only untouchable player on this roster. Myles is like that now. I think Myles has played himself into pretty untouchable unless you're talking, pretty close to it. But you're certainly not getting rid of him in any deal for Myles Turner. I think kind of the same for Terry and Gordon, just because I don't think the Pacers would want him. But with that core, right, that core four, and then filling Myles Turner in at the five, with presumably, I don't know, under the caveat of you giving like a PJ, a McDaniels, a Cody, whatever players you send out to the Pacers, you still have some decent depth pieces on this team. Julian, that's a core to me that can compete in the first round of the playoffs. And that's kind of been my goal this entire time for this Charlotte Hornets team. And it's been Mitch Kupchak's too. He's said a million times, we're not just trying to get to the postseason, lose in 4 games, go home, get bounced easily, and then say, hey, great job, we at least got into the 8th seed. They want to get into the playoffs, and they want to compete in a 7-game series like they did against 2016 Miami Heat, but eventually lose. Like, this is not a team that's won a playoff series since 2001 when you had Diddy, Mash, and all those guys. That should be the goal. That should be the goal, is to win a playoff series. And I think if you get Myles Turner across this core, I think that's good enough to at least compete. And then eventually, with the presumed development of LaMelo, the presumed development of Myles, also assuming that you keep him, and some other guys in place, that does it to me. Do you feel the same way with the Myles kind of going along with that same core?
Oh yeah, I mean Myles is obviously there. I don't think Indiana wants him just based off of the contract he's going to want this season,
Well,
and
I'm just
then
talking
whether.
about Turner, right? Like if you add
Oh,
two
okay. I'll
Miles
say
now, we're
Myles
going to have to
Turner.
make that distinct.
There's too many
Yeah,
Miles.
I
Okay,
know there are.
God.
There are Miles and Miles, right? So if you add Turner to that four, then
Yes.
that's a nice group of 5. I think you're putting out there and making it hard, at least for the next postseason team that you're playing, to beat you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you kidding me? You got LaMelo Ball, who's just a
Mm-hmm.
magician with the basketball. Miles Bridges, who, as I mentioned earlier, and I think most people have been saying this, is probably going to be the most improved player if he continues to play the way he's played so far the rest of the season, with veteran presence in Gordon Hayward, who I know a lot of fans want to see more out of Gordon just based off the contract. I always tell you, you look up at the box score, and a dude somehow has 20 points, the quietest 20 points that you'll ever
Mm-hmm.
see in the NBA, but he'll go out there and he'll produce. And Terry's been electric, especially recently when he was healthy. He kind of got back to the old Terry that we saw last year. But yeah, that 5, I feel as good about that 5 against anybody else in the NBA. Now, I'm not saying that team with those 5 guys in particular are going to be enough to go out and get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So you got to have the depth in order to be able to do that and have that second unit that could be really strong. And I don't know if they would have that after whoever they part ways with, especially if it's like a PJ Washington and a Kelly Oubre. But yeah, and I like those 5. If that can be the core here in Charlotte for the next, I don't know, 3-4 years, however long it's possible, based off of the salary cap structure in the NBA, I would feel really good about their chances, not only this year, but next season. And maybe depending on how many years after that, of having a chance of getting to the playoffs and just winning, and not just winning a series, but maybe going further. And that's what we want. Like you mentioned, it's been since 2002. Right before the team was leaving to go to New Orleans last time when they won down in Orlando, the last time that they won a series. And to sit here and now 19 years later, I mean, I guess 20 years later, that's just ridiculous that we've had to wait this long. And we'll see. At the very least, I want to have a team that can be top 6, and let's start there, get the top 6, avoid the play-in tournament. Then yes, hopefully in that same season, you can win a playoff series. But yeah, Myles Turner and those other 4 guys that you mentioned there as part of a starting 5 core, that would be very enticing if that's something Mitch Kupchak can make happen. If that's something that he wants to make happen, or if they want to just stick what they got going now developmentally, which I wouldn't blame him if he does that. with the young talent that they've gotten in the draft the last 2 seasons and the way that they've utilized the G League. You've already seen how that's worked out, the development of some of these other players who are on the roster now. And then what we saw in the last couple of nights with Book Knight and with JT Thor, and even what we've seen with Nick Richards this season, how they have a pretty good formula there where they might not need to go give away assets for Myles Turner. It just depends on what exactly Mitch Kupchak wants to do and what he thinks his team is capable of doing this season and maybe in the next couple seasons, and if it just fits in the salary cap wise. So I wouldn't blame him if he decides, I'm just going to slow play this and continue to have these guys win games, but then allow our center depth to develop over time, opposed to let's go ahead and get one right now.
Yeah, the center depth being really, though, only Kai Jones as far as the developmental piece, unless you really buy into Nick Richards as a guy that is going to be a solid rotation player. And that's where I struggle, because I don't know if I can rely on him. And so if they decide not to go, not on a fast track, but if they decide again not to go for an in-season move and still slow play this, for me, it's just, man, at some point you got to make that move, right? Like at some point you do. And this is his 4th year as the GM. It's his 3rd year post Kemba Walker. You kind of had a little bit of a catalyst enter the organization when LaMelo was as good as he was right off the bat. Now Myles is developing as you're supposed to. And this team can get all sorts of credit for developing talent. And you talked about that as well, right? Like, it's not developing talent doesn't only benefit you by seeing that developed talent on the court playing in your jersey. How it can help is trading it because other teams want it, and then giving you the type of pieces that you're able to allow coexist within your team a little better, because they drafted James Bouknight. They have Terry Rozier, who they just inked to a big-time contract. They're not letting LaMelo Ball go anywhere. Cody Martin is going to fit a little better contractually, especially if Bouknight is somebody that can play well enough in order to earn, I don't know, double-digit $1 million a year. Or are you still wanting to play or pay Bouknight that much? So, like, Cody might be the answer to help defensively also. Point being, Bouknight is somebody that you could trade in order to get a center, like a Myles Turner, or just anybody, but Myles being the example here. I think that's what helps with this talent development. It's not just that they play for you. It's the fact that you can develop these second rounders where there's only 15 roster spots on your team, trade them for guys that can come in and fit a little better with your organization. And by the way, fit, I think Myles is even a better fit with this team than what a Sabonis is, especially considering I think it's going to take more assets to get him, but also just on the court, Myles
it should.
Yeah. And Myles is a significantly better defender anyway. It's what this team needs. This team's scoring 120 consistently. Like, Sabonis is great. I'd take him. But Myles Turner fits a little better along with the assets that you'd have to get rid of in order to get him.
Yeah, I guess the only thing for me, and I'm cool with it. If that's what he wants to do. Like, I'm at the point where I don't have an opinion on this. Whatever Mitch Kupchak does is right. That's where I'm at. Like, after the first year,
full trust of Mitch, almost like borderline in Gettleman we trust back in those days, and now it's Kupchak we trust.
No, stop that. No, like the first year, I didn't love like the idea. Like, all right, I'm just gonna not buying out Dwight Howard, trading him away,
right.
Then you end up with business contract again, and I guess that sort of helped the team in the next couple of years. But it was still like, why are we paying this guy this much money? Because you had Dwight, Mozgov, Biz. You had like 3 of the worst contracts.
Well, and that whole rotation of centers where, you were moving off of, I forget, Doug has this whole thing figured out, the type of the transition, the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon type thing. But it's like,
good Lord.
It's like Spencer Hawes, Miles Plumlee, I forget, Lance Stevenson,
Roy
I think so you have like this endless thing that eventually you don't buy out Dwight Howard, which would have helped. Instead, you just are trading bad contract for bad contract. To your point, like Mitch Kupchak wasn't without his mistakes in the early going, especially when it came to handling the cap.
Yeah, no, just the first year, just those trades, and then like we're going to go to the playoffs this year and chasing that when you probably didn't have the roster to do it. Didn't help that Cody Zeller, of course, got injured, which I think is probably one of the primary reasons they haven't been to the playoffs since the 15-16 season. He's now gone, so whatever. But no, like I have pretty full trust in what he's been able to do, whether it's been the free agent signings that we saw like with Oubre, the draft days that he's had, and I'm not even talking about LaMelo. Like that was an easy choice, but like Miles Bridges, where I remember that night, a lot of folks were wanting Michael Porter Jr. or thought that maybe Shai Gilgeous-Alexander might have been the right choice for the Hornets. And maybe at this point in time, he was. And had they not gotten lucky last year and gotten LaMelo, that might have been the right decision. But Myles has been really good, and he's fit into everything that they've done here in Charlotte. So I'm at the point where whatever Mitch Kupchak thinks is right, whatever he thinks his team is capable of doing, I'm on board because he's proven since past that first year that he knows exactly what he's doing in this small market, small market, put that in quotes, here in Charlotte. And I think he knows what he's doing and how to build a team. And I'm not going to sit here and question the man right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a pretty good job overall, not without his mistakes, but what GM is without their mistakes. And Mitch Kupchak doing a pretty nice job of building this team so far, making those right decisions come draft time. And we'll see if there even is a decision to make via trade, because he hadn't done it yet, certainly in season, and hadn't pulled off this huge trade, even the offseason, when you consider what Mitch Kupchak has done as well. All right, I do want to talk to you about Stance before we move on to the next segment. Stance was founded in 2009, and the apparel represents a radical reinvention of socks, underwear, active apparel with sharp focus on comfort, quality, and creativity. Stance brings an atypical aesthetic alongside some of pop culture's hottest collaborators for the ultimate in style and self-expression, because everything you wear should be a direct extension of who you are and how you feel. So Stance believes that the perfect fit matters more than fitting in, that those who feel good do good. Go see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase. Use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. All right, let's talk about that Philadelphia game coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Is Locked On Hornets.
All I have to go off of is write-ups and highlights and some video tidbits on Twitter because I was not able to watch this game.
Tidbits,
You like tidbits?
it's a great word. Tidbits. That's just
it's
a funny
great
word. Tidbits.
I want to use it every single day.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
The curse continues. The Hornets can't beat Philadelphia. It's the 16th loss in a row. And of course, it happens just by 4 points, 110 to 106. The fourth quarter, Joel Embiid, he dominates all game long, but even at the end there, kind of put that game away. Scored 32 points, goes 8 of 17 from the field. But you look at where he did most of his damage, it's actually going to the charity stripe, where he shoots 15 of 19 free throws. Good free throw shooter. It's what Joel has done constantly throughout his career. But here's the thing. You look at the amount of foul calls against the Hornets last night. He shot
Here
20,
we go.
Shot 20 against the Hornets, shot 17 against the Hornets the second time out. Or excuse me, it's 14 the first time, then it's 19 the second. I was looking at his overall field goal attempts. And that's more than any other game. You have to go back to Minnesota to where he shot 21. But point being, man, got fouled a ton. Now, I do think he got fouled, but I don't think that the officials did a great job. Here's the thing I will say, right? It's not the reason the Hornets lost. Don't get mad at me. That's something that I hate as well. I hate blaming the officials for losses. Joel Embiid, he's a star. He dominated. It's not the reason that Charlotte lost. But we can also acknowledge that jump ball call at the end too. That was awful. Julian, you cannot look me dead in the camera, dead in my face, and say that jump ball was a correctly made call by the officials last night. That was a big point in the game where Charlotte could have gotten the ball back.
It might not have been their best night. Okay. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The jump ball call, not great. But I'm just so tired of fans. It's not even like last night. It's every time I'm looking on Twitter, and Twitter is just an awful place. Every night, all I ever see is people complaining about the officiating in Hornets games. So when I hear about it again last night, it just falls on deaf ears. Joel Embiid's going to go to the line a lot because you don't have a guy effectively who can guard him.
That's right.
That's right. The main issue. If you had an effective center who could guard Joel Embiid, and even if Mason Plumlee played, that's probably not going to, bring down the foul count and amount of free throws he attempted last night. But I just don't want to hear about how bad officiating was, because there's not a single franchise in the NBA or fan base that likes the officiating in the NBA. Is that a league-wide problem? No, just people being ridiculous because their team doesn't get preferential treatment every night.
Have you seen the graphic? Somebody put out this graphic that was kind of
yes.
bogus. Yeah, so it was basically who has the bigger fan base, and that's the team, that's the fan base that complains about the officials more so than any. And it's funny because the Hornets are actually, yeah. So it's like the Lakers, and then it's the Knicks, and then I don't know who else it was at the top, but it was pretty clearly just who has the largest fan bases. I mean, it was such a skewed model that they had out there. And the Charlotte Hornets, their fan base was actually really far down. either way, I do think I hate the complaining about officials. I actually can't stand it either. It's not the reason the Hornets lost. I hate using that as an excuse. The Hornets would have lost anyway. Embiid's too good. And it's not like this is something crazy out of the ordinary. Embiid is going to go to the foul line. Happened a little bit more frequently than I thought. Still got fouled quite a bit. The jump ball was just an awful, awful call. And the official made it immediately, too. I mean, if the fact that that is your instinct is something I had a problem with. It's when the ball immediately bounces off of Embiid's knee, and that's what he decides to go to, like reaction. Oh, jump ball. No, that can't be your instinct. It has to be a foul call some way or the other, and then you can go review it, which didn't happen. And then, of course, Embiid wins the tip ball over one PJ Washington because Embiid is 7 foot. We don't have anybody 7 foot that's even decent
Yeah,
available
that's
right
the
now.
problem.
Yeah. So that was pretty tough. We needed a little bit of help from the official, like Terry, one on the tap against Golden State, and we didn't get it. Either way, they lose again. If we talk about the Hornets holding on, Julian, because they are without 5 guys right now due to health and safety protocols, including huge pieces like LaMelo and Terry in the backcourt. Depth pieces like Jalen McDaniels, Mason Plumlee, at least you have somebody that is close to 7 feet out there when he's available. Ish Smith, so now you're down to like your third and fourth ball handlers on the team. With all of those guys being out, the Hornets are 1-2. Get a win against Atlanta, lose both, but very competitively so against Philadelphia. One, what do you make of their performances the last 3 games? Two, do you think they can hold on with a tough road schedule coming up and this next game against Sacramento, just some of the opponents they might have coming up? What do you expect to see here in the next few games?
Well, first off, Atlanta was obviously a huge victory for all that news to drop
Huge.
down and then to go and get that win. And then, of course, like the performance I saw the last 2 nights out at Spectrum Center, Wednesday night and then Monday night, are encouraging that, and we've seen it over the last 2 years. Like this team just does not quit. It does not matter what situation that they're put in, who they don't have on the floor. They're always going to give that maximum effort. And that was something 2 years ago you could not say right after Kemba Walker had left when they were young and they were figuring out what it took to be successful in the NBA. But the past 2 seasons, they are always going to come back. And you go back to night 1. I sat there in the arena. It's like, well, they're going to come back eventually. And what they do, they came back and won the game. So I'm not surprised at all how they played the last 2 nights. It's encouraging to see what Book Knight and JT Thor and those guys getting some sort of confidence after spending time down in Greensboro. And you're seeing the development part of this is working with the organization. Now, the only thing for me is, like, I know the NFL, what their deal with COVID. I know it's health and safety protocols in the NBA. How soon can they come back? Because is there a different system for vaccinated players and unvaccinated players? I know the vast majority of NFL or NBA players, there's only like a handful who aren't vaccinated, apparently. So, like, I don't know, when can they come back? Because that's kind of what's important for me to be able to answer this question. I think they got to win on Friday night against Sacramento, obviously. But when can we expect to see LaMelo, Terry, and everyone else come back eventually, potentially? Whenever?
Yeah, I mean, so if you go and look at the write-up, one, it does seem like LaMelo and Terry are the guys that have tested positive for COVID-19, with maybe a couple of the other players that are out, maybe just being some contact tracing. And it does seem, so if a player has a confirmed positive test for COVID-19, the NBA mandates a minimum of 10 days of isolation away from his team without any physical activity. After that period, a player must undergo a cardiac screening, reconditioning in order to be cleared to return to the court. And a player who tests positive also could clear the protocols by returning 2 negative PCR tests within a 24-hour period. So that's what you need to see from these guys. And if you had 2 players that test positive for COVID-19, again, it seems like you're starting backcourt, then they would have to return those 2 10-day period, and then we'll see what happens after that. Point being, to be honest with you, there's really no certain timetable. All I know is that they have a long road trip coming up for them after this game against the Kings. The Mavericks are included on this road trip. I'm going to try to pull it up here real quickly, but it's really tough.
Please.
Like this came up in a situation where, maybe you view it as decent enough because you thought the Hornets were going to lose some of these games either way. But if they lose to the Kings, that's when it gets tough. On the road against Dallas, on the road against San Antonio, Portland, Phoenix, Utah, Denver. Then they're back home on December 27th. So the whole month of December, they're on the road, and all of these games are out west. And you want these guys to come back as soon as possible because, man,
Yeah.
if you're going to fight against those teams, Yeah, I have to feel like Nick Carboni, Doug Branson, we were talking about this 2 days ago. Like it does feel like maybe a letdown is coming, especially with how tough the schedule is.
Well, they always go out west and play terrible, so
Yeah,
it
and
shouldn't
that
be a
happened earlier
surprise.
this year.
Right. So that should be a shock to no one. We'll know things have really changed. We have a different Hornets team when they go out west and actually either stay 500 or above 500 in terms of what they do on the road trip. Yeah, I look at these games. And the 19th is when they play the Suns. Today is what? The 9th?
Hmm.
They got to be, I mean, in 10 days, I would imagine that those guys are back, right? Just based off of
Yeah,
just going off of like how things have happened in the NFL, because you're telling me it's either 10 days of isolation or you had to get 2 negative tests within a 24-hour period. Like I would imagine that they're back before then, but it's like the continuity
yeah.
that you want to try and get back. Like maybe even Portland next Friday night on the 17th. Kings game, you're at home. You got to be able to beat the Kings at home. I understand earlier this season that was one of the probably the worst defensive performance of the season. Absolutely the worst
It was
defensive
bad.
performance of the season against Sacramento. They give 145 points, something ridiculous like that. The Mavericks game might be an L. Could have seen that even if they're healthy. But you can get on San Antonio's 8-15 right now. If you can beat San Antonio, if you can win 2 of the next 3, which the one at home you got to have, and you can split those first 2 before you play Portland, who has a losing record, by the way, and then Phoenix. I feel like that's a really good position for the team to be in. I think it's actually something that's absolutely possible to happen. Like they should not lose the next 3 games. I don't see why that would happen. I understand, who you got out there, but still, there's just too much talent in the team. And the way that Gordon Hayward at least played last night by being aggressive, and he's going to have to be aggressive until those guys come back, which I think he fits more in a role of being more passive when they're out there, which is fine. When you have 2 Rolls Royces in Miles Bridges, and not Miles, well, Miles Bridges is already out there, but I mean like in Terry Rozier and in LaMelo Ball, like it makes sense. Like those are the guys who are going to be hunting shots, opposed to like asking Gordon Hayward to go out there and do that. So I feel good about them Friday night against Sacramento. And then they got to at least get one of the 2 at Dallas and then at San Antonio, with San Antonio obviously being the one that you're going to point to and say, yeah, that's the one that they should and need to have.
Well, and the last time Gordon Hayward, he led the team in scoring last night with 31 points. The last time he led the team in scoring, it was at Sacramento, November 5th, when he scored 25. You look at these next games, as we talked about, you have Sacramento tomorrow night. Then you get 3 days rest, which is really nice. Monday on the road against Dallas. That rest is going to be huge, so hopefully that's enough to maybe get the win against the Mavs. And what also is nice about this road trip is that you have at least a day rest in between San Antonio, in between Portland, against Phoenix. That's when it gets hard, because then you play Phoenix December 19th. Then you play Utah the second night of a back-to-back. Then you get 3 days rest against Denver on December 20th. So it's going to be that Phoenix Utah quick turnaround. Great teams. Probably going to be L's in both of those situations. So you got to do your damage early, and we'll see if the Hornets can stay alive in the Eastern Conference while they have some key pieces out. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets today. Julian Council, the man helping us out. Locked On Panthers, go check it out. You're on Twitter at Julian Council, and I know you're always tweeting out the link. So make sure you get caught up on all of the drama. Jeff Nixon speaking today, your new offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. We'll see if he does anything different with all of this talent, all of this offensive
Probably
line.
won't.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Go check it out again. Locked On Panthers. Julian Council doing an excellent job for us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Julian, appreciate the time, man. Thanks once again.
Yeah, anytime, Walker. Go Bugs.
Go Bugs. We'll see if they can continue at least competing in the next few games without these guys. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow for a fun Friday.